What's going on? As a parent, I know we all love our kids. However, during this self-isolation period, we've gotten to spend a little bit more time with them. And boy, it's coming to a surprise to me. This week on Tomorrow's Code, we're not talking real estate, we're talking education. I'll be interviewing Dwyane Matthews, an education specialist, on how we can all cope as one and get out of this period together. Before I get into the interview, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, because somehow that sets off some analytics like this, which allows more people to see the video. Anyway, let's get right into it. So, I'd like to introduce you to education expert Dwyane Matthews. Thanks for joining me today, Dwyane. I know you've had a very busy schedule over the past few weeks, but before we get into the questions, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Brand, thanks for having me. My name is Dwyane Matthews. I'm an education strategist. I started out as a teacher. I taught for a little bit. I did a little bit of entrepreneurship. Now I spend a lot of my time working on education, future of education strategy, and anything that has to do with 21st century future technology from the fourth industrial revolution and the convergence of those two. So I spend my time doing that. I do educational consulting with a robotics, AI, and solutions company as well. And we create all kinds of interesting softwares and solutions for all kinds of industries. And I focus on education.
Okay, great. So, so let's get straight into the questions then. So the first question is, what is the first thing I should focus on during home learning with my kids?
So, Brent, this is a great question. And what I find is a lot of parents want to go right into the actual, the reading and the math and that sort of stuff. I think the very first thing that parents should do is think about what their coping strategies are going to be. There are a lot of coping strategies that we have naturally, or that we've developed habitually over time. And now we don't necessarily have those. So some people like to go to the gym. They talk to friends at work. They go out for lunch, they go out for dinner. All these things have sort of been removed. So really think about what are those coping strategies, identify them, and bring them to the forefront. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would think about is having a can-do mindset. A lot of people spend a bunch of time thinking about the things that they've lost, right? So there's a lot of grieving about, I really wish that I was going to get to do this for summer, or I really wish I was going to go on that trip. So really kind of process that, but get to a can-do mindset thing. I'm going to use what I have, the time that I have, and I'm going to make it work. So I'm going to decide to be resourceful. I'm going to be very intentional about that. And the last thing that I think that parents should really think about is social support. And that's social support for their students. A lot of students, their biggest time is recess. It's lunchtime. Yeah. And that's been taken away. So their entire life is kind of upside down. And they're also sitting in the background listening to the news and wondering why is everybody so anxious, and as they try to process and make sense of that. So to create the support networks, a lot of people have been using FaceTime to do this. House Party is an app that's jumped up, but to create those social networks, and then for the parent themselves to create that social network, to make sure that they're reaching out to their friends on a Friday night, that they're jumping on to Instagram Live and listening to their favorite DJs. Whatever they need to create that social connection, they should do that. But before anything else, highlight those things because they have to assume that this is a marathon and not a sprint.
Okay, so if you're like me, you don't think that we're going to be out of this anytime soon then?
No. If what I did when this started was I went and I looked back into history and I thought, gosh, what do we have that's similar? And the one thing that we can find is the Spanish flu from 1918. And, when you look at that, it took a few years for us to get past that. And so we know that we're using similar strategies, and it's going to take us a while. We probably have, maybe at the fastest, we probably have maybe about a year before we get access to a vaccine. And so we're going to be in and out, I believe, in that. So right now we're at the top of an S curve, and maybe it's coming down a little bit. But the real threat is a second wave. And so we really want to spend our time managing that second wave very, very carefully. And so I think that's going to give us a little bit of in and out, and until we get to vaccination, and we're probably going to have to vaccinate the entire planet like we did with smallpox.
Wow. Okay. All right. So second question I have for you, Dwyane, is if I want to take the lead on my child's home learning, should I plan out a 6 hours of work online, or what is a good place to get the work done?
So this is a great one. And one of the things that I did, Brant, was I thought, a lot of schools have started this process before us on the other side of the planet. So I reached out to a lot of connections, and I said, what are the wins and what are the losses? What have you guys learned? And one of the things that they said was they started out with a 6-hour day, and that became very, very difficult to keep kids engaged, because a lot of school is social interaction. It's moving back and forth between classes. It's learning how to interact with each other. So the full 6 hours at school is not sitting down in instructional time. And so trying to recreate that with a computer is going to be very, very difficult, particularly if students are young. Yeah. So what I said to parents is divide your day into 4 pieces. The first 2 pieces, give it about 20%. The last 4, give it about 80%. The first 2 pieces are the fundamentals. Those are, the reading, the writing, the basic math, right? The standard arithmetic, if you will. Really focus on those. And then the 80% is really around projects. So to create projects that can be stretched out over time, creative projects. And then with my son, who's 10, we also have exponential technology projects. And we sort of blend those two. And that's sort of the approach that we've taken. Okay.
All right. So one thing that has really come out of this, and I can say even for myself, is technology. A lot of apps that we may or may not have used, like booking this interview with you. I've used Zoom a handful of times, although I surprised myself when I figured out that once I retrieved my password, which I did not have whatsoever, that I've actually been signed up for Zoom since 2018.
Wow.
But never had the need to really use it, right? I always met with people in person, etc. So, Dwyane, the third question I have for you is that there are so many online apps out there. Are there any online resources that you would specifically recommend?
So, yes. And it really, I like to tell parents, it really depends on what you'd like to do. What are your goals? So, for example, with my son, one of the things that we were concerned about was there's always gaps in learning. And so how do we fill those gaps? And how do I know that there are gaps? If you did not get 100% on every single thing all the time, there's a gap. If I got 90% on something, that means that there was a 10% gap. And that gap, we have the threat of it compounding over time. So this is a great opportunity to go back and fill those gaps. The app that we use for this is Khan Academy.
Okay.
Khan Academy is fantastic. It's an app that was created by Sal Khan, and it has everything that you want from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. So my son has actually gone back to kindergarten math. He's now in grade 5, and he's working his way through. And the goal is for him to realize how much A, he's learned, and B, that there are actually gaps, and it's okay for those gaps to be there, and it's okay for him to fill them. And that really gives a sense of growth mindset, and that's really important.
Okay.
The other that I found that was really interesting was one that's called Time for Learning. And Time for Learning, it's a bit expensive. It's about $20 a month, but it's a whole package. It's right there. And a lot of parents have been finding success with that. But that app is American, and the content is American. If you're looking for things that are Canadian, not necessarily an app, but there is a platform called mynelson.com. which is created by Nelson, the textbook company. They do Canadian curriculum.
Yeah.
They've been around for about 100 years. And so they've opened up their cache for free until June, which is great. And they also have an education ecosystem called Edwin. It goes from grade 6 to grade 11. And that's also a fantastic resource as well.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. You know what? I'm definitely going to try some of those with my kids, definitely. The fourth question I have for you is a question that I'm sure my parents would have had if I was a kid and they're going to ask you this. And I used to think as a kid, what do you mean you don't get it? And because they always say math is math, right? So the fourth question is, I don't get my child's math. The way I learned math was different. Do you have any specific advice here?
This has got to be the most common question that I've gotten in the last little bit. You know, the way that math is taught is very different. When you and I went to school, for example, you know, a grade 4 math curriculum might have been this thin. It might have just been multiplication and division. Now you have numeration, you have number sense, you have word problems, you have probability. It's very, very different. And so it's a lot more conceptual and probably not as much rigor as we remember. And so that's very, very different. What I say to parents as well, same advice I gave before on the last question, Khan Academy is fantastic. What Khan Academy does is that they have short videos of the concept. And after you do that short video, you then have an exercise. And then after that exercise, you have an assignment. Once you sign up as a parent, you can see the back end, how well they're doing on that. But what's really great is that your student can go back to the video, they can toggle that video back and forth and figure out where the gaps are. And you know, the one caveat that I would say is to make sure that your student realizes that the goal is to fill the specific gaps and approach mastery. Once they do that, the pressure's kind of off of right and wrong. It's sort of like, okay, I just need to sort of really figure it out. I need to have questions to figure it out, and I need to know that I'm mastering on my way in. That's the best one that I find. And as a parent, you can sit down and you can realize, you know what, I can learn a lot of the gaps that I've had as well. A lot of parents tapped out on long division because that's when math got hard.
Okay. I'm laughing because I sit down with my kids to do math at times. I'm like, whoa, I got to think about it at times. Like, okay, yeah, I've done this. Yeah. So, okay. Good. So the last question I have for you, Dwyane, is something that as a parent, I think we all have, we all run into with our kids is get off that iPhone, get off the iPad, enough screen time, etc. But now we're in an environment where it is going to be all screen time, where we're encouraging our kids now to get onto the iPad, get on the iPhone, learn, etc. So I thought that we were supposed to cut out screen time. But the question is really, how much is too much screen time?
So that's a great question. And you know, the way that I respond to that is that I say that I've been on record many, many times before saying that all screens are not created equal. And the technology itself is a tool. And it really does depend on how we use that tool. And let me give it some context. We have a 600-year-old technology that we typically use in a school, and it's called a book. And we've taken that technology and we've de-risked it. We've taken out all the things that we don't want our kids to see, and we have a certain type of books and certain books that are sort of lined up in a chronological order from the time we're about 6 all the way up to post-secondary. So we've taken this technology, we thought it was a bit dangerous, we've de-risked it, and we've organized it into a strategy. Here we are at 2020, and we have another technology that's just as exponential. It's based on, you know, communication, it's based on information, and we're trying to get our hands around it. So what I say to parents is measure, monitor, and have a purpose. I put my screen time into an entertainment box, an education box, and a social box. And I measure and I monitor everything. So any app that my son has to use, I use an app called Screen Time. that comes with Apple. And any app that he tries to download, I know about it. It comes to me first. It has to go through a passcode with me. I can close and open things. So if it's, if I don't want them on certain things in the week, I can close those. So I close YouTube in the week, that can open up for an hour. I close certain shows. Netflix he can't see all the time. And then, there's just almost like a pathway to the educational things that I want. And I manage and monitor that. I actually get a readout on my phone about how much screen time he's had and what apps he's used. And so I find this way that we're able to really kind of measure, as opposed to just giving our children, what may be one of the most powerful pieces of technology ever created, and just randomly leaving them there with it. So I think we just have to be a little bit more intentional about the screen. And then the other piece, I think, is social. I mentioned it at the very beginning, but that social piece is terribly important. My son has a standing video play date, if you will, between 4 and 6 with a few of his friends. They get together. They may play games together. They may watch videos together. But there's a very specific social time, and we manage and monitor that. So it's not just I'm going to be up at all hours of the night, whenever, right? That would be one of the things that I would say. The other thing that I would say is pay attention to certain negative traits that could happen, right? So there's certain negative things that can show up, like irritability, neck pains, body pains, inability to sleep, a loss of time, a sense of time, all these kinds of things. And once you start getting a sense of those, then you want to balance your measurement. So that's what I would say to parents in this particular situation. But now a screen is almost essential for the next 6 to 12 months.
Unfortunately, all those symptoms you described there, I actually suffer from. So maybe I've had a bit too much screen time myself.
You know what? You would be surprised. The first time I put this app on and I measured my own screen time, I was a little embarrassed and felt a little bit of a hypocrite when I was telling him that he needed to measure his. And it's really helped me to sort of balance my screen time. One of the things that I've done is I literally have gifts and affordances where I may leave my phone at a certain time of the night. I'll plug it in the bedroom. And so then I know that there's 2-3 hours I'm over here. I won't bring it into the kitchen because I know that's why I get together with my kids. So I have sort of these little habits that I've put around myself to really help me manage that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dwyane. Any other quick tips you may be able to provide us with?
So the last thing that I would say to parents is, create a social emotional plan. The dynamics of the family has changed because of COVID-19. The actual dynamics of life have changed. And so we really need to be intentional about putting a social emotional plan in place, and being aware of those things. So, for example, with my son and I, we try to do mindfulness every morning. So he wakes up and somewhere around 10 o'clock, he comes into the room and we do mindfulness for 15 minutes. We try to get outside to do very intentional exercises, right? I try to do a little bit of a workout in the morning, a little bit of a workout in the afternoon, and really it's around mental health. So really making sure that your mental health, you're spending a lot of time guarding that. And the other piece that I would say is, information boundaries. There's a lot of information coming at us at exponential levels around just the term COVID-19. I really start thinking about what do I want to know and where can I find that, as opposed to just taking in everything, right? So, I'm not American. I can't vote in the States. So I really limit my exposure to American media. And I really start thinking about what times of the day. Before I would pick up my phone first thing in the morning and check the news, I don't do that anymore. I wait at least an hour and a half to do that before I get into it. So information boundaries and a social emotional plan and mindfulness.
Okay, Dwyane. Well, thank you very much. If anyone has additional contact, additional information, or they require additional information and would like to speak to you, is there any way that they can contact you directly?
Sure. The best places to find me is Instagram. Send me a direct message on Instagram. It's I am Dwyane Matthews at Instagram, or on LinkedIn. Just look me up, Dwyane Matthews on LinkedIn. That's a great place, and I'm very, very responsive at those two places.
And I can tell you for a fact, he absolutely is. So he's on Instagram, he's on LinkedIn all the time, and I love his posts. I follow you actually religiously on Instagram, especially.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, your different posts with your family, the warrior princess, and everyone else, and the crazy mad scientist, I believe.
Yeah, he's a billionaire scientist inventor. Yeah, and it's changing because now he's really getting into animation and art. So he's evolving as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, Dwyane. Greatly appreciated. And again, this is Dwyane Matthews, education expert. And thanks again. And hope to speak to you soon.
Brent, thanks for having me.
Okay, you're welcome.